I'm Yvonne Hamoud, registered social worker and owner of New Moon Counseling, but out of the office, I'm a mom, wife, daughter, sister, and friend. Join me each week as I sit with a special guest to discuss everyday things that impact our mental health. We'll be chatting about everything from mental health and relationships to media and current events, as well as personal experiences and reflections, all in the hopes of normalizing our humanness and helping you see that you're not alone. This is Outside the Therapy Room. Hi everyone, welcome back to Outside the Therapy Room. Before we get started, I wanted to quickly say thank you so much for the awesome feedback that we've been receiving on our podcast. If you want to kind of see some behind the scenes looks or participate in some of our upcoming topics, you are welcome to follow us on Instagram at Outside the Therapy Room Pod, where we share upcoming episodes and ask some poll questions just to kind of hear your voice and have you participate with us here. Today we are joined by Alex.
Hey!
Today we're going to be discussing female friendships, and I think we've kind of sprinkled a little bit here and there with our previous podcast episodes, kind of like hinting at a future episode on female friendships.
Yeah.
Because they're obviously a big source of connection for us, and in our episode on life transitions and in our episode on imposter syndrome, we have noted that female friendships were impacted during that time. So now we're focusing fully on female friendships. And so, what are female friendships like for you?
I mean, I think it's a hard topic. I think it's a sensitive topic for me. I've lost a lot of female friendship. I've gained a lot of female friendships. Mm-hmm. I have a hard time myself holding friendships. I find that I get overwhelmed and I forget that I have to do some of the work sometimes. So that's some areas that I'm actively trying to focus on, which obviously are going to be a deciding factor for those friendships a lot of the times. But yeah, I feel like I've also, as I've gotten older, realized that the friendships I do hold so much weight in my life. And when I don't have them, I see such a disconnect with like balance, self-care, all of those other things that I do need. Because community is something that is important for me, but also something that I struggle to hold.
Yeah. And it's interesting because we're both sitting here with our own struggles with female friendships. So let's just, put that out on the table. But it is hard. I think community and connection is so important for us as humans, but it can become really overwhelming when we're having to navigate all of these different things because there is an effort that we need to put in maintaining these female friendships, which can be really tough when you're a mom, when you're navigating school or work and your home life and all of these different areas. I think there's like a meme out there of like somebody on fire being like, me trying to do work, exercise, engage in self-care, call friends, do all of these things because it really feels like a lot.
Yeah, it's all fine. It's all fine. Mm-hmm. No, not really, but we try.
Yeah. So I think maybe we'll start just by sharing a little bit about the challenges with female friendships. Like, again, we could have made an episode just on friendships in general, but I feel like female friendships, there is a different, there's like something different when it comes with female friendships than it does with maybe male friendships or just friendships in general where you're, with a bunch of different people. I think it's different. And I know for myself, my own experience with female friendships, even with people outside and inside the therapy room, we have heard many times about the challenges with maintaining female friendships, making new friends, or somebody really longing to have close female friendships. And I think I've kind of fit in that category of really longing for that kind of female friendship.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that sometimes we forget that, like, we think differently, right? Like, our brains work differently.
Yeah.
So when you talk about, like, that male-to-male friendship or male-to-female or whatever friendship it may be compared to, like, female-to-female friendships, I think there's a higher expectation that we sometimes have for each other because I think women look for a very different connection and I guess maybe feel that if they don't have that, it's something that they can't actually keep moving forward with.
Yeah.
So I also think too, it's funny that we talk about like really longing for that female friendship, and I feel like our community, I guess, of social workers, psychotherapists, everything in this practice, like it's predominantly female.
It is.
And we always are talking about trying to maintain like connection outside of our jobs, because we try so hard to have like that identity outside of it, but we all have such a hard time doing it.
Yeah.
Because like we said, like life, work, everything else that goes with it, it's really hard to maintain those things.
Yeah, I think you made a good point too, just like speaking more specifically on our field of work. In the episode with Arsh on identity, we talked about that part of like that therapy brain not really fully shutting off. Arsh mentioned how when she's at the grocery store and she sees somebody having a really hard time or being rude or aggressive towards a cashier, being able to acknowledge like, oh, like, how are they feeling? Maybe like what has impacted them that caused them to respond in this way. And I'm the same way when it comes to movies or with other people. And I think that sometimes, I don't know about you, but for me, it's been like, how do I show up for my friendship right now? Because my friend is venting to me. And as a friend, I might vent along with them to be like, yeah, that sucks, or that's horrible, or that person is like, you know, a bitch or whatever. And other times I'm like, are they venting to me because they know that a part of me is a social worker? And so how am I showing up in this? And I don't know about you, but for me, that can be so hard, because I'm like, oh my God, what do I do? Like, is this Yvonne me? Like, or is this therapist me? How do I approach the situation? Now I'm in my head about it, and I'm like, like, I don't know what this person wants or expects from me.
No, I agree with that. I think it's actually been a negative for me, like huge negative. Because I actually don't know if I know like the difference between that version of me and this like outside the therapy room version of me. I think they kind of are the same people. They've always been the same people. I've always been that person to jump in and try to help. But I do notice it's actually made me detach from relationships, because now that I have had, like we spoke about in life transitions, about like such a big different change of like leaving my job or shifting the way I'm doing things in my life. And I find that sometimes now I'm always expecting certain friends to be like, I know you're not working, but can we talk about this? And I'm like, I guess. Because how do you place that boundary all the time?
Right.
And then actually go, okay, but if I don't do this, am I actually going to come and spend time with them? And I don't, right? So being able to take that step back has actually taken me away from some of the friendships, because it's just sometimes not worth it for me. Sometimes I have to place that boundary, and boundaries suck. We know that.
Yeah.
Like, they're not easy to do.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to look at that shift, right? When we're talking about being in like workplace mindset, I think it's hard to shut that off. And I think it's hard to really find friendships that are not either judging the job that you're doing, because that's always something that can happen, or like using it for advantage. Yeah.
And I think like what I'm hearing too is pressure, like putting pressure on yourself to like, you know, like, I don't want to show up for this person because I'm like out. I'm used all of my capacity in other places. Yeah. But then feeling this pressure, like, well, because they know what I do for work, maybe they're seeking me out for this purpose. Yeah. And then it becomes so much more difficult to set that boundary. Yeah. I think maybe it would be helpful for us to kind of go back and talk a little bit about our friendships, if you're comfortable. Yeah. I can start. I think female friendships have been hard for me from the start. So my elementary school was in a really, really, really tiny, like, I don't know what to call it, township. Like, it was really small. And so there was just one class for each grade. And the grade that I was in, I was able to make some of those friendships who eventually we all kind of together went into high school. And so with the first beginning part of high school, it was nice because we were all close. We were all there. But I always kind of felt like an outside person. I came in I came into that school in grade 5. So some of these friendships and these connections have already been made from kindergarten.
Yeah.
And so I went in and I was able to make really close friendships with these 2 girls that were a year older than me, and still have like the people within my grade, the girls within my grade that I was still close to. But I would say my closest ones were the older 2. When they went to high school, I'm like, oh my God, my friends are gone. Like, I have nobody.
Yeah.
And speaking of transition, I didn't really see them anymore because we weren't in the same space.
Yeah.
They both went to different high schools. It was more challenging to find a time to meet. They were out exploring different parts of their lives and different people. And so we actually lost contact when they went to high school. And so then me and like the girls in my grade went off to high school, new friendships were made. And the friendships I made ended up being the friendships that they also attached to. And my experience with girls at that time was not great. There was a lot of gossiping and talking about people behind their back and just very drama filled. And that's just not me. I the oldest, and I have 2 brothers. I was more in like that boy world. So making connections with boys was easier for me. And it was so much less emotional labor and work.
Yeah.
Because you're not having to be like, what is this girl going to say about me behind my back? Or having to manage conflict. It was just so much easier. And I connected a lot quicker with boys at that time. And then like, you know, as I engaged in like romantic relationships during high school, friendships changed and kind of, you know, they were a little different and harder to maintain. And then, you go off to university and you don't always meet those same people. At that point, I had met my now husband. So we were spending a lot of time with his friends. Yeah. And they were all guys, and it was good because I'm like, great, this is so easy. I remember telling my husband one time we were married and no, we were dating. And we were going to go out with the guys, and I didn't care what I looked like when I went out with the guys. Yeah. Right? I'm like, we're going to the sports bar? Great. Sweatpants, no makeup, hair's up. I didn't care. Mm-hmm. But the minute Sam was like, oh yeah, they're bringing their girlfriends, I'm like, oh my God, I need to put my makeup on.
I need an extra hour.
I know. I'm like, I need to actually look presentable. Like, I always kind of felt that pressure with girls and women as I got older. And I think like during that, we were the first people in our group of friends. So with my, like, you know, 2 or 3 little friends that I had at the time. And then my husband, obviously, guys, they have different friendships. Yeah. It was bigger. Quantity. Yes. So we were the first ones in our groups to get married and to move. And that was a huge life transition that impacted everyone in the group. Yeah. So they would invite us out to go do things, or, you know, let's meet up at this club. And that really, we weren't at that spot anymore. Yeah. We kind of just wanted to hang out at home and enjoy our married life. And that's when invites stopped happening. Yeah. And we would only see people sometimes. And so I think that was really challenging for both of us. But for me, the friendships that I had, some of them were younger than me. And so I was married and in a career, and they were still finishing university or still enjoying single life. And I think that was really hard for me to actually feel that level of connection with them. And the same thing happened when I got pregnant. And again, first people in the friendship group to have that. And again, like, I don't want to go out on a Friday night because I have a freaking kid at home. Like, I'm tired. I'm going to put the kiddo to sleep and probably watch a movie, read a book, and go to bed. Yeah. Right? So like that life transition was really challenging. And we did notice kind of, for me, I wasn't seeing my friends as much. I was connecting with different people that were in the same space that I was, like in mommy and me groups, or with like family who were also pregnant at the time. And so my friendships kind of evolved depending on where I was in life. So still now it's really difficult for me to make female friendships, and I think I long for that, to have somebody that's close like we see so often. But I've never really had that. It's always kind of been up and down. But yeah, that's kind of been my experience with female friendships. What about you?
Do you know what? Mine's similar. Mm-hmm. I have a lot of similarities to you. I moved around a lot as a kid. I was born in London. I wasn't born here. So I think we moved I was pretty young when we moved, but
Yeah.
I don't remember not having like good friendships. I think when I lived there, I had really good friendships in the area I lived, but obviously those didn't come with me. I was still very young. So coming to Waterloo young, I remember like building good friendships and then like them always just being pulled away because it was, I think when I moved to Waterloo, we were at one school for maybe like 1 or 2 years, if that. And then I moved to Kitchener in the middle of grade 2. And the middle of a grade is always harder.
Yeah.
Like you have experience too when you're in the middle of like an actual school that has so many grades. It makes such a big difference because you're not connecting the same way. You are like this new kid. So it's a different way of kind of seeing that at the first place. But because I moved a lot, I didn't really hold really strong friendships, I think, until I was a little bit older. I had some really good friends that I met. I have a friend that I met when I was, I don't know, maybe in grade 2, grade 3. But I met them through like somebody I was in class with. I ended up having a lot of friends that were like a year younger than me. I grew up with a best friend that I really met, I think randomly. I can't even remember the story of how I met her. And then our parents were best friends. So that's kind of what kept us going.
Yeah.
But she got held back 1 year in school and totally disintegrated our friendship because she met a lot of people, and like I became friends with those people that were younger too, and I'm actually friends with those people now and she's not. So I've held on to some of them, but I also had a baby young, right? So I was 17 when I ended up having my daughter, and I was of course the first person out of all my friends to have a baby and have that huge transition in my life. And everything changes from that point, right? I had a baby. I wasn't in a great relationship. I kind of moved over to Elmira. So I was really, really isolated in that, and nobody really could relate.
Yeah.
So a lot of the people that I was really close to like loved me. We were all still like talking, but it was very far in between. Over time, like after I left, I regained those friendships. It was great, but it turned into a lot of the, we have to go out, we're doing all these things, and it was always trying to like fit in with that crowd. But at that time I also found, like, same as you, I made a lot more male friendships than I did female. It is so much easier. And I think there's always a question back and forth, which I think is important to bring up, that a lot of the times you're like, oh, males and females can't be friends. Like, there's so much expectation that goes with that. Or like, I'm like, okay, yes, maybe in some circumstances, right? I'm not here to say either or. But I believe I had some really good friendships at that time. Wasn't with females, but I was able to like fill that community I needed. And they did fizzle out, the longer term relationships I went into. So, I mean, whatever that means is whatever it is. But I think at the time it did what it needed to do. I think I thought anyways, my best friendships probably happened when I was older and sitting in like a job that I actually was consistent in. I had some friends that I had met younger that stayed with me, but I think big things happened in my life. The passing of my mother-in-law, my friend moving like 5 hours away, close to Ottawa, like those things happened, and the friendships kind of disintegrated because I had an expectation of what I needed from my friendship. After so much time and energy that I'd put into that friendship for that person for so long, it didn't feel reciprocated. So I immediately like shut down and detached from those relationships. And I think the issue was on both sides in that situation, but I think what I'm really pushing on there is like those transitions in life, we don't have control of how those things are going to affect our friends. And I think those expectations do sometimes help in a positive way, and sometimes they are negative. And I think it's hard to actually see them until it's happened. But I will say, like, now in my 30s, I have friendships that I've made through like my child's best friend. Her is 2 years younger than her, but they're so close, and I've become like best friends with her mom. And it was a weird transition because I was like, it's my daughter's best friend's mom. She's my friend. To like this, like, no, this is just my friend. This is just a friend.
Yeah.
But she's older than me, right?
Yeah.
Probably like 10 years older than me. I have another friend that I really kept from work that again is older than me. And I've always found, I think, people that are older to be a little bit easier, I guess, to connect with.
But it's also like the transition that you're in, right? Like,
Yeah.
I was able to make friendships when I was pregnant through like my kids' swimming class, or not pregnant, sorry, when like I had my kiddo, and everyone that was there was like in a similar life stage. Yeah. So regardless of their age, there were like, similar connections or similar experiences that you're that you're going through.
And I didn't get those experiences, right? I was a young mom, so I didn't really have the means to have like all of those things that I think a normal like older partner and partnership would go through, right? Like it was such a different dynamic that I think you're right. I think like I have a teenager and we do connect because like she has a teenager and we share war stories together because motherhood is hard. And I think that those are areas that I needed. I needed to feel like I was doing okay as a parent.
Yeah.
And like being the only friend out of my other group that has a teenager, I'm like, I don't want to be the person that you guys learn from. I don't think I'm the best.
Yeah.
But I think we can never think that. And then the other side of it is like that friend that I made at work. It's like healthcare. Working in healthcare for 11 years, I can understand what those people are going through. So it makes a difference.
Right?
Yeah.
It makes a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was really hard for me when I left my job. And I talk about that in the imposter syndrome episode that we do. But when I left my job, it was one of the hardest things. And I lost like a lot of friendships because we were too busy. Neither of us were reaching out the way we should have. We just weren't putting the work in.
Yeah.
And I sit here now going like, oh my gosh, like I'm at fault for this. But also we get to that moment where we're like, if you're not going to reach out, why would I? And it turns into like this weird battle of trying to put time and work and energy. And I think also in that sense, like if that's happening, maybe we actually do have to sit back and look at what is in front of us, and maybe it's not working. But yeah, I will say I have a very exciting day planned on Saturday with a friend. We're doing one of those where to trips. We're going to drive for hours, and we haven't done it before. So, I mean, it's cool to see how that friendship is going to blossom because of that.
Yeah.
Because we are sitting with similarities, but there's also differences, but we can appreciate that about each other. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Oh, I'm excited for you.
Yeah.
But that, like, again, I think from the experience that you mentioned, when we're in school, we're all in that same space. We all have a collective, like, I don't know, experience that we are all going through. Yeah. And it's a more of like a natural connection that we have because we are all stressed with school and don't know what we're going to do with exam, and oh my god, prom is coming up, like who are you dating, who are you, like all of those things are happening at the same time, and so it's easy for us to connect, and it feels effortless ish.
In a way, yeah, because like you always have something to talk about, right?
And
but
then
it does change.
It definitely changes, and I think as we get older, there's more effort we need to put into our into our friendships, because we're dealing with family, with work, with like our own self-care, we're dealing with extended family, like all of these things, and so the effort then needs to change, and I think that's kind of what I took from that last piece that you mentioned, that some of your friendships when you left that job ended up moving because it wasn't a collective place. Yeah. Right? You're not like in this like bubble of, hey, we're at work, so we can always just stop by the desk, talk, have like a moment of connection, check in on your weekend or what's going on with this, vent and gossip about things happening at work. Like all of those connections aren't naturally happening anymore. So there is more of that effort to like, hey, I haven't heard from so-and-so in a long time. I'm going to go message her. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like I think that's a really important thing, which makes it like finding friendships at this stage outside of our work, it makes it really hard. And I don't know about you, but like clients coming in to see me and being like, how do you make friends? Like, how do you do that at this age? Like, it's
I do
such
get
a
asked
weird
that, and I'm like,
concept.
you tell me when you know.
I know. Like, can you share some of your tips with us? But one thing I wanted to touch on too is, for me, I had really strong friendships when I was in high school, but they changed.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I was close to this one person during high school, and I think you described this when you were sharing your experience too, but like, I had gone through a breakup and I expected that friend to be there for me.
Yeah.
And they weren't. And that hurt. And that
Yeah.
was really hard when we had sleepovers and like, I've told you everything about my life and now you're not showing up for me. Whereas if you went through a break, I would be at your door with like movies and popcorn and ice cream and all of the things. And so when we have that expectation and it's not met.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we do need to do a check-in and be like, ooh, was my expectation too high? Is this a realistic expectation? Or is this something that is really meaningful to me in terms of like my values, how I want to be taken care of, my boundaries? And if it isn't, then maybe this isn't the friendship that I'm requiring, like that I'm needing. And I think it took a couple of tries with the same person and the same outcome happening for me to be like, okay, this is not a friendship for me. Like, I'm not being met in the way that I'm wanting to. It's actually causing me more stress and more tension and anxiety. So maybe this is a friendship I need to let go.
Yeah.
And I was able to build another friendship, but again, she was younger. It was like, it just naturally, different life stages and things like that happened. But I think for me, I remember going to the movies to watch Bridesmaids with my mom. Because she's my friend. Because she's my friend. But like, I remember going to watch that movie and I laughed so much, but I left the theater being like, oh, I want girls.
Yeah, like I had the same reaction. I left and I was like, you know what? I'm like sad that I don't have a group of friends that I could literally do all of these crazy things with.
Yeah.
Right? And it not go like horribly wrong because I have such different groups of friends. That's hard to kind of like integrate them all together and make it work because they all are on different I guess ways in their like places in their life, I mean. So that is hard. I think my biggest thing too about what you were saying is like it is capacity. Right? This expectation that we have, we don't always pay attention to somebody else's capacity to hold what we need. And I think sometimes when we push and push and push on that expectation, we are damaging the friendship anyways because it's like lack of communication and understanding each other's needs in the first place.
Yeah.
If you don't have those conversations and understand where each of you are in this, generally it's probably going to end up somewhere where we don't want it because neither of us know what we want. We can't read each other's minds. So I think it's really important to understand each other's capacity when you're going into friendships.
And the emotional burden too.
Yeah.
I think that also touches on capacity.
Yeah.
If I'm putting more effort, more energy, more holding space for you and I'm not getting that reciprocated, then maybe this isn't, it's kind of like what is it? Not a give and take relationship. Exactly. It's not a give and take.
Yeah.
It's just I'm constantly giving and I need to set boundaries now. I can't constantly be in that space.
And you're not going to call that person to like vent about something because you know at some level it's going to turn back onto them, which is not always a safe place to be when you're actually needing to get some things out. So, yeah.
I think like as we were talking about movies and Bridesmaids, like I think that some of the shows that are out there and the focus on friendships. I mean, I love the shows. I love New Girl and Friends and like all of them.
Because we're hopeful for it.
Exactly. I think it's like such, I don't know, it's something that we want. Like
it's kind of fairy tale.
It is. And they become our friends, even though they're like, we're watching their lives.
We're so sad when something happens on a series and we're like, are you kidding?
Yeah. Like with, again, like Friends and How I Met Your Mother, like all of these shows focus primarily on the friendships, not so much on the family relationships. And sometimes it can cause us to have an unrealistic view or expectation of what friendships look at that age. So like if we look at Friends for a little bit, like they're roommates, they are literally each other's families, and that's wonderful. And that happens in real life to some people, but I think that that's sometimes the exception, not always the rule. Like,
Yeah.
it's rare to
Yeah.
find that level of closeness where you don't get completely exhausted by people.
Yeah.
Right? Like Monica and Rachel, they've had disagreements on the show, but they're pretty, like, they're dealt with in a comical way because it's a
'cause it's a
sitcom.
show. Yeah.
But like, again, they're still able to hold capacity for one another, and they're still able to understand each other's differences. Like, there's just so much of that just isn't always realistic.
Yeah.
Or the conflict that they're having is a big comical laughing point of the series, which again isn't realistic because that's not real life all the time.
Yeah.
And so I feel like sometimes for me, it's been like, I want that. Or in even just with clients, it's been like I want to have a relationship like Jess and Cece on New Girl. And it's like, okay, that's wonderful because some people actually get that, but also it's not always accessible. It's not always real for the situations and experiences that you have had.
Yeah.
So it kind of builds this like just unrealistic expectation and can cause that grief of, I don't have that and I want it. And so you're grieving the fact that you don't have it, but then you're also longing to have that in a way when it's so hard to be there, to be at like the core friendship stage when you're just meeting new people, right?
Yeah. And I mean, my brain automatically, I think, goes to like the negative side of it because I think we have to know both sides.
Yeah.
And I think we'll jump back and forth on this, but I think there's such a big difference. Like when we're looking at Friends, like the whole series is based around them being friends. It's great.
Yeah.
And then when we're talking about New Girl, it's like they actually have like an independent relationship that actually shows some things that absolutely could happen.
Yeah.
But that's not real life all the time. But then we also see this other side of looking at Friends and going, okay, like really great to see that, but sometimes it's actually not great. It's not positive to be putting every single moment of our lives into our friends and letting our friends overtake experiences, relationships, all these other things. That it does make a difference sometimes when we're looking at those things. We have to look at some of the things that may be seen as toxic or negative in that sense, because it is important. Like we are always trying to learn balance.
Yeah.
And I think there's a very fine line between like giving all of this time to friendships because we need that community.
Yeah.
And it affecting our actual relationships and every other thing that comes in. So it's interesting, like when you look at like the different sides of shows, I think you have to be realistic.
And I'm going to jump in here with another view of sometimes those family members aren't actually they're our family, but we don't really like them. Like we got to choose. We might not choose to have them be our family. And sometimes there's conflict. Sometimes there's no contact. Sometimes there's very strict boundaries with those family members. And so friendships do end up becoming family.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And so like there's that, like those two different views to kind of show that friendships can look different.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be, that's our people, those are our family members. And other times it can be, am I just too overwhelmed with this friendship that I'm avoiding or, dropping something off my plate, which is maybe my family or my other responsibilities and connections, right?
Yeah.
So I think like there is like those two kind of different views of, depending again on where each person is at.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's circumstance, right?
For sure. Yeah.
I think I've seen that a lot too. Like my mom was adopted. And I think a lot of the family that she integrated into her life after were very close friends, and still to this day we have a very close-knit circle of friends that are family. And I've always been raised in the way that like your friends are probably going to be like a better family than a lot of the family that you've had, because I haven't seen like a good idea of family in the background that goes with that. So I think it's a really good point. Like there's always going to be those two sides depending on the situation that you're coming from and what those people are offering you. But I think it's important to know the difference, right? And being able to distinguish what works for you and what doesn't.
Yeah. I think like along with like movies and unrealistic expectations, and I think we've probably touched on this already, is like life stages.
Yeah.
And how that changes and shifts. I went out on Tuesday with some of the partners of my husband's friends, and one of them just got married, and she was sharing how like it's so hard to be the married person because she's single friends over here, and then she has friends that are starting a family. And I've heard clients kind of be in the middle of that too, being like, oh my God, I'm married. I'm like at this stage of my life. And there's friends that I have that are single and trying to find their partner. And there's other ones that are having like a baby or are starting their second, right? Like all of these things are happening and kind of feeling lost in terms of I'm in this weird middle space between these two different life stages and having to navigate that, and it being so different with like, again, with the single friends, it looks one way. With the friends that have families or are mothers, it looks a different way, and not really knowing where they belong or even feeling pressure to form into one, right? To like, come have a baby so we can have more things to talk about. And you're like,
let's have babies together.
Yeah, like I might not be at that stage yet right now, right? So it can be quite challenging. And like I think you described this too, the types of connections that you build with those people might look a little bit different because of where the other person is at and what's overcoming their life, right? You have a baby, that kind of becomes your life. You're talking about like, oh, no sleep, and my baby did this and my baby did that, and oh my God, they laughed for the first time, and it's all wonderful things. But as a friend who doesn't have a kid, it might be like, okay, that's nice, and I'm so happy that you're experiencing that with your baby, but also like, how are you? Like I asked how you were and you told me about your baby, not about how you're actually doing. So it can be hard.
I had a thought when you were talking about that too, that I lost and then it came back. But I think there's this like expectation that we place, and back with those expectations. And I think we hear it a lot with our partners. We always say like, your partner can't be everything for you. And I think sometimes in friendships, we're also like, this is the person I want to be everything. I want this person to be able to do X, Y, Z all the time. And I think we have to remember that we have that quantity of friends that hopefully still are quality. But I think we choose multiple friends because those people are able to meet separate needs. Maybe you do go on road trips with one. Maybe you do have gossip venting sessions with another. Maybe you like do everything with your kid with another. But I don't think it is attainable to have one friend that's always going to fill every need. And when we expect that, it's not going to go well, right? It's going to put so much weight on another person. And that's unfair, right? So I think we have to remember that no one person can be every single thing that we need. And I think remembering that consistently is helpful, and understanding like maybe what we could need and how that could be attainable.
And I think like, again, we're probably broken records in expectation. There should be like a game. How many times did we say expectation in this podcast? But I think like, again, expectation, because yes, everything that you just said, like we can't put all of our needs on one person. That's a lot of pressure and can be quite overwhelming. And we will probably end up being hurt in the process when they're unable or they're not available, either emotionally or physically able to kind of meet our need at that time. And it can be quite isolating and lonely when we experience that. And so I like, the thing that I like to talk to clients about is like the friendship triangle. So like at the base of the triangle, we have like acquaintances, right? Those people may be people that we see at work and we connect with wherever we're at, right? It might be like the mom that we see at our kiddos' dance lesson, or the person that we see at the gym or at the Zumba class or wherever. And they're acquaintances. We're able to connect with them, but it's very much about the environment that we're in with them.
They're check-ins.
And it's also the biggest base of the triangle, because we have a lot of them. We can have a lot of different acquaintances in different places. And then in the middle tier, it's close friends. So close friendships, we might go out for coffee. We might, venture outside of that space that, that we're always in. And so we, like go out for coffee, go shopping, go to the movies, do all of these things, but we might not feel completely comfortable sharing all of our vulnerabilities with them.
And don't get as deep, right?
Exactly. And that tier is a little bit smaller because we're funneling out the people from acquaintances into the space. So it might be more like a select certain people
Yeah.
that you're going to be in that space with. And then at the top, right, the smallest space is that best friend space, because there's less. Everyone isn't going to be our best friend. We're not going to like, communicate all of our vulnerabilities with everybody because boundaries, which we talked about in our one episode about the different types of boundaries. That's like a physical and mental, emotional boundary. But also it's not realistic. And so we do, at the top tier, we might have one or two people on there, and they're the ones that we can be vulnerable. We can get deep in with, or they might know more parts of ourselves than we show in the other tiers. Yeah. And so again, with what you mentioned about needs, sometimes somebody from the acquaintance does get to meet our need for catching up or venting about work, and that is a positive connection that you have with that person. Whereas your need for adventure and and discovery and creativity might be with somebody that you're close friends with. You might go and do like a hiking trip, or do something else.
Messy.
Fun.
You get to be messy with
you
those
get to
people.
be messier with them. And then again, the best friend stage may be the person that's always at your house and just helps himself to food, or is carrying your baby, and like all of those different kind of connections that you have.
Yeah. I love the triangle, because I feel like it gives such a good idea of what is needed, first of all, in that community of friendships, but also it's so important to see like it goes smaller, because there's a reason that we get up to that quantity piece. Or quality piece, sorry. Get up to that quality piece, because we are sifting out those things that we do need in everything. But I wanted to make a point about it too, is sometimes it's hard to get to that top best friend piece, because the quality that you're looking for is like holding everything for you. But the other side of it is some people actually have a hard time sharing the deep stuff. And I want to say that even if you don't always share the deep stuff or don't feel comfortable, it doesn't mean that it's not that best friend. It doesn't mean that you haven't made it to that tier. It just means that maybe you're a person that doesn't actually feel like they want to share things that they're not comfortable with, or maybe you're just not at that point yet, because I think it takes time sometimes.
Or it's like expectation too, right? Like if I feel really comfortable telling you about like my whole entire day and everything, you might not have the same comfort. So you might be a great listener, but you might not share back. But if I expect like, oh, hey, I shared A, B, and C, so I expect you to share A, B, and C, that is putting that negativity in that friendship. And then it's not going to go so well.
No, and that's why I wanted to say it, because I think I hear so often with clients that we're sitting here and we're explaining like what is happening in the change and the transitions in life and how these things. And I think a lot of the times we're looking at this idea and we're like, okay, but I don't want to do that, or that doesn't happen for me, so I feel like I don't have that. And I think it doesn't have to be black and white, right? I think it is a little bit more of a gray area, that who you feel safe with, who you feel comfortable with, maybe that is your person. Maybe they aren't a best friend. And maybe there's something that is stopping that from happening. But it doesn't mean that they're not still really positive connections for you. And I don't think we have to like label it in every single circumstance. I think sometimes you just know who's good for you, and that's okay. Right.
And that again is like an expectation, expecting people to not always be able to show up for you in the way that they need to, because they're their own person, they're experiencing their own stressors, they're experiencing their own anxieties about needing to show up, or they're just feeling really overwhelmed and aren't connecting with you as much. It doesn't mean that they don't care. It's just that they just don't have that capacity or that space. I think another thing we can go into is comparison. We can compare our friendships to those on TV, to friendships that we hear other people having. It can also feel like a competition if you're friends with someone who you view as your best friend, but they view someone else as their best friend. And then you're like, oh, I don't like that girl, she's taking you away from me, or I'm nervous about how this other person is going to come in between us and our friendships, or I want to also be a priority. And all of that too, I think, has to do with attachment, like our attachment to our friendships. it changes, and sometimes we have that level of security or that secure attachment with a friend where we're like, we might not talk for like days, but I know that they're still gonna be there and that they're thinking of me, and they'll randomly message me like, hey, coffee tomorrow? Okay, cool. And you're back to where you started. Whereas other friendships might feel a little bit more of like an anxious attachment. So like, hey, are you good? Are you okay? I miss you. What's going on? Are you like, do you not like me anymore? Are you friends with this person? And I think a lot of that time, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're communicating that anxiety with them, but we are holding it. So we are seeing social media is another thing that can impact our comparison
absolutely.
and our expectations, because if we are seeing this person that we thought was a friend, in quotes, was a friend, and they're engaging in other relationships, or they went out for coffee, we internally might have a negative thought being like, they purposely did this, or they don't care about me anymore, or they really wanted to hurt me, or they meant to keep me out of this lunch or dinner. And that's not necessarily true. That just can be an anxious thought that's coming up for us right now, because we're sad that our friend is engaging in other friendships and we weren't invited, right?
And probably rooted in fear, a little bit of jealousy. Like, we're human.
Oh my God,
And probably a little bit of I guess like abandonment, isolation. Like, when we're looking at that anxious attachment, I also wanted to say too that there's such a big piece that you're always feeling like you need to fill it up more, right? You always feel like you need to be this person that's just filling, so people are actually gonna stay. And I think that
the people pleaser.
So when we're sitting with that, when we look at like the secure, where I also have some of those friendships where I haven't spoken to them in years, and then I come back and I'm like, oh my God, how's everything?
Same.
I'm watching everything on Facebook or Instagram and it looks amazing. But then I also have those ones where I'm like, I need to constantly be messaging these people, because if I'm not, they're gonna feel like I don't have any interest in this, and I don't want them to feel like that, because we've had such good moments, and it is a really hard difference to be in, right? Because one of them can be exhausting, but you care so much that sometimes we just have a little bit of shortcoming. Sometimes we have a hard time connecting, and that's okay. I think we acknowledge that in ourselves.
Or we're feeling burnt out. We're not going to be able to always show up in that way.
Life gets busy.
It does. And I think it's important to note that, like, again, I've heard these thoughts sometimes from myself, sometimes from clients, of like, I must have done something wrong because they're not messaging me anymore, or because they're not putting an effort in our relationship, which sometimes it has nothing to do with us. Sometimes it is because, their focus is somewhere else. They're feeling overwhelmed and anxious, or they feel like they can't show up for us the way we need to. And that kind of freezes them or paralyzes them to be able to show up in like a small way. So I think it is important for us, anytime that we're like, well, I would have done this or I would have done that. Well, that person's not you. They're their own person, and they might not show up in the way that you would hope or that you would show up for them. And that's okay. So being able to accept people for how they're showing up, and if they're not showing up for you in a way that feels good, then maybe that means that the friendship has reached its point. Maybe that means that the connection that you had, or the purpose of that friendship, served its time, or it's just like a quiet moment in your friendship, and maybe it can come back to flourish in another time. But I think that a lot of the times we're ending friendships kind of without realizing that we're ending friendships, or we might purposely end a friendship, or we might stay in friendships longer than we feel we need to because we have a historical connection to them. Or we feel like there's something else that's pulling on that. So like, for your example, like, oh, maybe I'm friends with, like, my kiddo's friends with this person, so I have to keep that connection, when in reality, like, well, maybe you don't.
I want to, like, because you said something about kind of like that friendship. I can't remember the way you said it exactly, because my brain doesn't follow everything perfectly, but you talked about this piece where like the friendship maybe like isn't doing something or hasn't been doing something. I just want to say too that there's this other side of it, that I had so many people coming in and they're like, I just don't understand why I'm having a hard time dealing with this friend, or I'm having a hard time being okay with what's happening. And sometimes we do get into question that maybe that friend was actually never the person that you needed. Maybe that friend has always been somebody that you've questioned, but you like held so tightly onto that person because you didn't have a lot of quantity in friends. So we hold on to everything sometimes, even if it's not healthy for us.
As like a safety, right?
Yeah.
Security.
Yeah. And I think like when we have some conversations, I think a lot of the times my clients are looking at this, but like, this is my friend. I need this. I need to fight for this. And we're always trying to like investigate and be like, but do you? At this point, if it's been doing so much and taking so much out of you and you're still feeling the same way, there's a good chance you picked up this friendship at a time where you thought you needed something, but maybe like you just never actually felt super connected to this person. And I think it's okay to sometimes realize like, yeah, it feels crappy. I'm going to say when we're sitting here being like, it feels horrible to be like, oh, actually this friend is not who I thought they were, or I don't like this person as much as I thought. We don't have to like everybody. It's okay. Feels crappy. We're allowed to just feel crappy in that moment. We're allowed to feel sad. We're allowed to feel shame. But I think making the choice to actually pay attention to those things for you and for that friend, I think it's a better choice to sometimes just feel crappy about it. Than putting both of you through something that's not helpful.
Yeah, I agree. And while you were saying that too, I thought about conflict. Because sometimes we have conflict with friends, but instead of addressing the conflict or being open about it, we people please around it, or we show our boundaries in other ways, like not talking to them anymore, ignoring. When like this is just a conflict. If once we move through the conflict and actually have our fight, we could end up being close again. But sometimes like that fear or discomfort with conflict can cause us to just end those friendships. But I agree with what you said, because I feel like I was there too at the end of high school with this particular friend being like, I think like, it's sad that we're no longer going to be friends, because I have such good memories of our friendships and I can grieve that. And I don't think I've ever really felt that same connection I had with that friend at the time. But there was also like, I was getting like stepped on. Like my feelings were being taken into consideration, and all of like the backstabbing and all of those words that we can say with friendships.
Fun times in high school.
Oh yeah.
Favorite time of our lives.
Oh god. But like all of that was happening, and so it was like grief, but at the same time I'm like, you know what, like this isn't serving me right now. And it's okay for me to move away from it. More recently, I had like a friendship that I felt like there was a conflict because they stopped communicating, and you can only do so much on your end. Right? You can check in. Hey, let's be honest. Like, let me know if I did something. Let's have the fight. Let's have the conversation. Let's put it all out there. But when they're uncomfortable or they're stuck in that people-pleasing place, then it's not going to go anywhere. And so the relationship naturally just runs its course. And it's sad. You can grieve, but at the same time, you can look at it and say, well, this is the effort that I was attempting to put into it. And there was effort on the other person's end that needed to be placed that wasn't. And so I think a lot of the times too, like you pointed out with clients, it's like, if you're putting all of the effort to maintain this friendship, is it like, what is it actually doing to you? And how is it serving you? Is it more work to be the one that's always planning and calling and organizing and checking in, but that's not being reciprocated? Then that can hurt, and it can be hard, and it's then damaging your friendship in some way. I know I've had clients come to me with that too, like, I'm always the one that's planning. I'm always the one that's reaching out. And sometimes we fall into that role naturally. We can communicate about it. Like, hey, I'd love for you to reach out to me. Sometimes I'm noticing that I'm always the one that's reaching out. And then leave it. And if they don't, they might not have the capacity. And then we can, again, be resourceful in connecting with other people in our lives.
No, I agree. I think when I think about conflict too, I'm going to call myself out on this one too, and I'm going to own it, that like the breakdown of the person I called like my best friend for so long.
Yeah.
I did put a lot of work into that relationship, and like she's been very clear about, she knows that I put a lot of work into it, and she many times has appreciated that. That was on me. Like the breakdown was on me.
Yeah.
I chose not to communicate with that friend. I chose to sit within the space I was in when I lost my mother-in-law. I held an expectation and I didn't shift, right? So it has been 3 years. I think 3 years since I've lost my mother-in-law, and I think I've spoken 3 words to her. And it was like the first year I said happy birthday, because that was always, and I kind of just ignored. And like she reached out and like said great things, but I very much,
You were hurt.
yeah, but I detached. I was like, I had an opportunity, and I look at it now, right? I think we can always look at things after. And I had so many opportunities, and I still have opportunities to reach out and really say, you know, I have to communicate this. I have to feel better about this. But I think there's part of me that is just okay with like, we had such a long run and it's okay. And maybe I'm okay with the fact that there isn't more connection. There isn't like this repair, because maybe there doesn't need to be.
Yeah.
But I think it's important for us to be able to sit back and understand what we could have done or what we should have done and all those different pieces.
Yeah.
And really figure out where we want to be with that and be able to actually be at peace with it.
Yeah.
Because like, I miss it,
of course,
but there's more pieces to it that I just can't put more time into it. So it's okay for me.
And I think too, like any relationship, we talk about this in romantic relationships, family relationships, like there's two participants.
Yeah.
It can't all just fall on one person to be the one that is the problem solver and the fixer and like all of those different roles. It does take effort and engagement on both parties.
Yeah.
But I think like the big question that we get is like, how do you even make friends or maintain friendships? And I think with the maintaining of friendships, kind of like what you mentioned, it's like recognizing your expectations, checking in on yourself at times, but also not being scared to communicate your needs.
Yeah, big one.
Huge. And I think a lot of the times we see that as like more romantic relationships. Like, I'm going to communicate to my partner that I'm needing attention and I want, you know, time without technology so that we can connect and have great conversations. But other times we do need to, like, our needs are everywhere. We have needs at work, we have needs with our friendships, we have needs with our family, and they're all going to look a little bit different. But I think it's okay for you to communicate those needs. Something that's been really helpful for me that I've heard from some friends is I'm not always on my phone, so I'm not always going to be able to message back. And that's helpful because then it's like, okay, they're going to get to it when they get to it. And I'm the same way sometimes. I'm like, you texted me, I'm responding 2 days late. I'm so sorry. It was just like a crazy day. But having like that already be communicated builds the expectation of, okay, this person isn't going to respond to my text right away. So I don't need to go into like the anxiety spiral because this person hasn't gone back to me. And I think like being able to communicate that, or to communicate like the need of like, hey, I need check-ins sometimes. I don't need them consistently every single day, but sometimes it's really important to me to feel connected to you by having these quick check-ins. And just like, just starting that conversation off. So I think that that's a great way to kind of maintain some friendships that we have right now. It's not being afraid to communicate what it is that we're needing from them, or how, like, the capacity that we have in showing up for that friendship.
I think I like the fact that you're talking about this communication piece, because some of the things that I actually hear from some of my clients as well is some of us are going through mental health struggles, right? And sometimes we get into those lows. Sometimes we don't know how to deal with communication. And I recently had a conversation that my client wasn't able to really communicate in that moment. And the friend was really angry about that and was like, you should have told me. And we were talking about sometimes it's okay to actually just let whatever happens and repair after. Sometimes it's okay to turn around and say, you know what, you're right. I should have probably messaged you. I actually couldn't at that time. I was dealing with something else, but I really want you to know that, like, you are important. All these XYZ.
Right,
like, sometimes the repair attempt after is okay because everything's not going to be perfect. Sometimes you're not going to feel great. Sometimes things are going to come up. There is circumstances that you're not always going to think about texting your friends for a store. You're going to miss hanging out. You're going to be distanced. Like, that happens. But I think with that communication piece, it's always important to look at, if you're intentional about the repair and they're a friend that you think they are, it's probably going to be okay, even if it takes some time. They'll understand each other when they want to. And I think if you're honest about that, that also is a huge piece of that communication.
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, I mean, just general kindness. We don't know what people are going through, right? We don't know what we don't know. Even though we're close friends with someone, they may be going through something challenging that they're feeling shame or embarrassment or upset or whatever. They just don't want to share it yet. Maybe they're just not there.
Absolutely.
And so to be able to do, again, to have like those check-ins, like, hey, notice you've been a little distant lately. Like, is everything okay? Gives the other person an opportunity to be like, to say yes, no, or whatever, and start that conversation. But I agree with you. Sometimes the repair, as long as there is a repair, if you feel like that's worthy of the relationship and you want to maintain it that way, then waiting for the repair and owning your part in that.
Yep, absolutely.
Like, I understand that my distance, even though it's valid for me because that's what I needed at the time, but I understand that hurt you. And I'm sorry that hurt you, and I could have communicated it. I just wasn't in that space.
Yeah, that accountability piece is huge.
Exactly. And I think too, with like new friendships, I think right now as adults, like, where do we make friendships? We're not at school. Well, not all of us are at school, right? Sometimes it's at work. Sometimes we're unable to make those friendships at work. So it's being creative. Sometimes
I'm glad you brought that up.
Sometimes it is like, where do you make friends then? It's like, you can make friends in places where you know you're going to meet like-minded people or people with similar interests. So joining clubs, going to a place that you know, like going to the gym, if that's something that's important to you, you can strike up conversations, and it's so terrifying.
Yes, it is.
It is terrifying, but it's putting yourself out there, engaging in conversation, and having the realistic expectation. Is this 100th time that we've said expectation? Like, having the expectation that it's not going to be a, wow, we're best friends all of a sudden. It's going to take some time. It's going to take
work.
It's going to take work, and it's going to take time to build that connection in that environment for it then to be promoted to outside of that environment. So like work friend, being a friend at work, doing all of these things, and then, hey, let's go grab dinner. Now you're engaging outside of that space. And so that's kind of like a quote unquote promotion that you've built this level of trust and safety with this person that you want to see them outside of that safe space or common space.
I think we struggle with that.
Yeah.
Every time we try to like do things as friends, we're always like, we're not working. We're not allowed to talk about work. It's so hard.
It's so hard.
It's so hard, especially when you're in that area. But I think I'm happy that you brought this up, just because one of our colleagues and I had a conversation about this, and we're like sitting in this like pit of like, oh my gosh, like I don't know how to make friends. We feel like it's impossible.
Yeah.
But then we go, okay, this is really awkward. This is weird. But I started going on like the app Bumble BFF, and I'm like,
I was just gonna talk about that.
And like, I'm so glad you brought it up, because we were talking about it, and she was like, yeah, you know what, it like, I don't know, I feel weird about it. And I was like, you know what, I went on an app for like finding friends a long time ago. I struggled with it, so I deleted it, but I've been hearing a lot more about this like Bumble BF, and I'm like, okay, like maybe I can make a BFF on an online app, because like I met my partner online dating, so I'm like familiar at least, right? Yeah. But then I'm like, oh, I feel really weird. Like I kind of feel ridiculous, and I'm like, I don't want to do this. Also, for me, I have a hard time sharing things. I have a hard time really connecting with people, and I mean, like, everybody that's listening to this one will definitely hear about it in imposter syndrome episode. I do struggle with those things. I struggle sometimes with the social interaction. Yeah. So I think there's like this big piece of me that's like, yeah, I want to do it. I can find the best person in the world. But then there's this other side of me that's like, oh my God, what if I fail? What if I can't find anybody? What if nobody wants to be my friend? What if I make a friendship and end up doing more work? Or what if somebody hurts me? Like, it's such a scary place to be.
It is. You're putting yourself out there. Yeah. You're being vulnerable and building these connections, and it's scary.
It's so terrifying. But I think the thing I always remind myself is when I push myself to be in the uncomfortable moments, I have so much growth. Right? And I think we've probably told our clients this a million times, broken record again.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have to be in the uncomfortable to feel like we're actually moving forward with something. Yeah. And it feels terrifying and it feels horrible, but sometimes there's a lot of beauty on the other side of that. Sometimes there's not, and we learn to get through that and cope and manage. But I'm like in this weird space now where I'm like, oh my God, should I do it? Should I do it? And then I'm like, no, this is no. But then I see so many amazing women doing it.
Yeah.
And finding people that like really, really connect with them that I'm like, ooh, but I want that. And I'm so proud that there are so many of even my clients and everything that really push out of that comfort zone and are so extroverted when it comes to finding those friendships. So I'm like saying it here that I'm so proud of every single female and person that decides to like really put themselves out there, because it's a quality that I'm working very hard to like work towards. And sometimes I'm always like, tell me how to do it, will you be my friend? And like we can't do that obviously, but
like why can't we, like kids goes like, oh hi, do you want to be my friend? Like I've taken my son to the park, like my boys to the park, and there's a random kiddo, I don't know who the hell that kid is, and they'll be like, hi, do you want to be my friend? Okay. And they're playing.
We're best friends now. And
the life, like, and then we end up leaving them like, babe, who was that kid? What's his name? I don't know. But they were my best friend, and they like bugs, and they like this, and they know so much. I'm like, what happened?
Kids don't care about judgment. They're so free. They have no worry.
Yeah.
We get stuck in our brain.
We're stuck in our brain.
And we're like, oh my gosh, this person's going to hate me. What if I'm not wearing something? What if they're making fun of me behind? Like, there's so many worries from experiences. Our experiences make everything, like, ridiculous for us.
Oh, yeah.
Even if it is a good experience, right? We see so many other experiences in society and, like...
This is like our fear
TV,
episode, right?
Yeah. Like, movies, TV, everything. We see the negative. Like, what we always say, like, what's the worst that can happen? We have seen it every day, what the worst that can happen. And I think kids are just like this innocent, beautiful beings that are like,
I'm gonna take something from your book, kids. Like I'm gonna go and strike up a conversation with someone and be like, hey, do you want to be friends? Do you want to go? But I think what I love about the app and why I have thought about it too is that everybody that's on that app is wanting to make connections. Yeah. Whereas I've attempted to make connections with other moms at my kiddos' schools, and they're not in it. And maybe they're not in that space where they're trying to make...
Maybe they have enough.
Maybe they're enough. Like, they have enough, or they've already built and formulated their close-knit group. And that's okay that they don't want me to be a part of that. But I think what makes it a little bit more, like, quote-unquote easy is that everyone there is looking for the same thing. Yeah. I've also thought about it. What scared me is, like... I don't know, just like Waterloo's so big but also so small.
Okay, what if you go on it and like
I
your
see
clients is on there,
that's like our own.
And all of a sudden we have like this like
like,
all these commonalities, and you're like, I already knew this, but I'm not allowed to be your friend.
That has happened though. There's so many memes out there, but it's like I see my client, I'm like, oh, we would be like best friends because we have so much in common, but we can't.
Sometimes I'm like, maybe we can fire each other and like meet each other on the street, quotation street. Like it just doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way. We are ethical in our work, and it's always protecting our clients first. But
the hardest thing about this job, I think, is connecting so well with so many people.
Yeah, but then in your personal life, for sure. I
have that problem all the time. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'd love it. And then all of a sudden I turn over and be like, I've had to turn down. Yeah. I had friends when I started this and they were like, oh my gosh, can I come? No. I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't support you. I can give you the name of 1 million people that can support you.
Yeah.
But I can't do it.
want to see you as a therapist.
Yeah. So it's like, it's such a weird line to
Well,
be
because
on.
like massage therapy, like so many different
Yeah.
professions, they can engage in those interactions with people. And I
absolutely.
think for us, it's really hard. But it is to protect our client, and we really, really care about that. But it is different. That's like a whole podcast episode
it's
on
so
its
different.
own. Like all of
know.
the things that are challenging for us
So
now.
if you see any of us on Bumble or BFF, just
Hey,
so
we
you
should
know.
get them as a sponsor. Like, hello, we're talking about
We should.
that.
But if anybody sees us on it, please just swipe.
swipe to whatever direction you need to swipe.
We will grieve together.
Yeah, but I think too, like for me, because of the lack of those friendships, I think I've gotten really comfortable with being on my own. I love going to the movies by myself. I love, like, I went to go see Wicked, like a Broadway show by myself, because nobody that I know likes Wicked. So, like, I have no shame or worry in doing that, but there is still, like, when I'm there, I'm like, oh, like, best friends are going to see this movie. And
Like, let's be best friends too.
like, hi, can I join your group? And, like, when I went to go see Wicked, it's a movie about best friends. Like, it's a Broadway show about best friends. And so there was so many friends that were there together. And I'm just like... So it's like holding that space for, I know I'm capable of doing this on my own and I'm okay with it. And also it would be really nice to have somebody to share this with.
Yeah.
So like it is, it's kind of like all of that. But I think
that's negative for me. I think I've gotten so comfortable with not having like a group of good people around me that I have a hard time now not wanting to just be alone and independent in things. Like I'm like, well, I'd love to just stay at home and read, and my friends are like, let's go do something, and I'm like, me, I'm good because I've gotten so comfortable, and now I have to like really push myself out of it, and that's uncomfortable.
Yeah, I would say that that's my husband.
Yeah.
Like sometimes his
and
friends
I
would
want to
call
be
him.
friends.
Well, maybe he's a huge homebody, and so sometimes his friends would be like, "Let's go," and he's like, I'm like, go out, babe. Like, that's so fun. And he's like, nah, I kind of just want to, like, stay
That's
home.
mine, too, though.
Yeah.
Tim is very
and
much
I'm
like that.
Fucking idiot. You have friends inviting you out. I would die
so
for
many
friends. And, like, no one's calling me to go out.
Yeah.
Like, I'll go out with the guys. But, no, it's, like, everyone's so different. Everyone's looking for different things in their friendships. Like, exactly like you said. You're like, nah, I kind of want to be home alone and read my book or not do anything, not have to be on.
Yeah.
Right? For
any
other
friends
people.
out there that want to sit in, like, a sunroom when it rains and read, I'm your girl.
I'm coming.
I'm your girl. You can be invited.
But you know what? Actually, that's a whole other topic, and we're already going over time. But that's a whole other topic because, like, sometimes friendships, you can do things together, but independently.
Yeah.
So you can go to a coffee shop and read, and you guys are together.
Yeah.
But you're both doing independent things, right?
Yeah. You're feeling connected still.
Yeah. And there was a lot of that in university, right? Like, we're studying, we're hanging out together, we're studying, but we're doing that independently.
Yeah.
So anyways, to wrap this up.
Yeah.
If you are wanting to make connections, there's so many awesome groups out there. There's so many websites that you can go on to like find clubs and groups and, you know, meet people with common interests. There is that Bumble BFF if that's something that you're interested in trying, or even just striking up a conversation. Like, connecting with the people that you consider acquaintances and see if any of them you feel that level of connection and comfort to move them up to close friends. Give them, like, you know, make space for that possible promotion. But also, like, normalize the fact that it is challenging. It's hard to put yourself out there. It's scary. There's a lot of these anxieties that are coming up. And if you're wanting to maintain those friendships, check in on yourself, label the emotions that you're feeling, and communicate what it is that you're needing to those people around you, right? I think we've shared a lot about our own personal experiences today.
I mean, that's what we're here for, right?
But hopefully that has normalized for you that friendships are hard. We as therapists also struggle with it in our own independent way. From our own like field and education and like our role as therapists can struggle in friendships. But I hope this served just to normalize that and just recognize your expectations with friendships.
Yeah. I think you and I are going to go say hi to random people and make friends. So we'll let you know how that goes maybe. But I think, I agree. I think just really look for what you want and pay attention to how you can be supportive and how you want to be supported.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Alex, for being here.
Yeah. See you again soon.
We will see you soon. for listening to Outside the Therapy Room. This podcast is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. If you reside in Ontario and are interested in working with one of our therapists, please visit our website in the show notes. If you reside outside of Ontario, a quick Google search or search through Psychology Today will help you find a therapist near you.